Welcome, everybody. It's a smaller room for a smaller group, which is great. My name is Ethan Knight. If you guys don't know me already, although I think most of you do. And I'm here with National Fellowships and Scholar Programs. We've got a couple other people here joining us. We've got Dr. Hoke here, who's our chair this year for the Udall committee. And we've got Emma Silvesberry, who was our honorable mention from last year. And then down at the end of the table, we have Jen Betts and Kendall Cartali, who are the rest of our staff from National Fellowships and Scholar Programs. So without any further ado, I'll jump right into our Udall present. Oh, go ahead.
So I know you're Ian.
Yes.
This is our small group.
You're right, small group, right? It's Brandon.
Brandon.
And my name's Nev.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you guys so much for coming today. And of course, if you can't tell already, I'm from the north, so I talk fast and I talk quickly, or loudly, sorry. So if I've said anything that you can't understand, go ahead and stop me and I'll repeat myself. So we'll jump right in. So what is the Udall Scholarship? Well, the Udall Foundation, right, awards scholarships to students, college sophomores and juniors, for leadership, public service, and commitment to either issues related to Native American nations or to the environment. And there's a little bit of a split there, and we can talk about that. Since there's only 3 of us here, we can probably talk about that individually. But in general, we tend to have a few more students that are interested in the environmental side. But hopefully we'll have a few more students interested in the Native American side too. So you might be asking, why should you apply? And we've got a couple of reasons, right? The first is that you get to network, right? You get to do some awesome networking with alumni who are leaders in their fields, right? Again, the Udall scholarship is focused on leadership. That's an important part of it. And so the people that earn it go on to be leaders, right? On top of that, right, you'll get to meet like-minded students working on different diverse issues, again, related to Native American nations or the environment at the 5-day scholar orientation in Tucson, Arizona, which maybe we can talk. I was going to say maybe Emma can talk a little bit more about, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Emma. But maybe we can talk a little bit more about that if you guys are interested. And then, another reason why you should apply, right, is to leverage that impact by networking with other leaders and public servants, right? So this is not just a leadership focused scholarship, right? It's also focused on that public service aspect, right? So being able to network with other public servants, other leaders in public service is another great upside, right, of applying for the Udall. And then finally, of course, receiving $7,000 per study is another benefit, right, that is hard to beat. So that's sort of the quick rundown, right? And again, remember, leadership, public service, and this commitment to Native American nations issues or the environment, right, are the 3 sort of founding principles here. So who should apply, right? Well, you guys, obviously, right? It's for sophomores and juniors passionate about using their careers to benefit the environment or again, Native American issues. You might be concerned about how sophomores and juniors are defined by Udall. And it's kind of tricky, so I've got this here to walk you guys through it. So you have to have completed at least 3 semesters of college coursework, right? Not including those AP credits or high school courses, right? So 3 semesters. And then to be a junior, you need to have 1 year, you have to have a full-time year after the year you're in right now, right? So if you're graduating next December, you don't count, right? You need to have that full year ahead of you. So I was going to talk a little bit about majors here, but since there's only 3 of us, I thought I'd ask you guys what your majors are. I know a couple of us have talked before, but for the benefit of the room, and we'll start with you, Ian.
Environmental science.
Excellent.
Marine science.
Marine science, awesome.
Marine science with a focus in chemical oceanography.
Awesome, right? And all 3 of these majors are perfect for Udall, right? I've got a big long list here of examples of majors, but in general, right, your major is less important than your sort of commitment and connection to the environment or Native American issues, right? So all majors are welcome. So I want to talk a little bit about those three pieces that we sort of started with, beginning with leadership. And so, I just want to tell you a little bit more about what leadership looks like, right? Obviously, this is a very important part of their application and of being a Udall scholar, right? So the committee looks for applicants who bring people together, right? By inspiring and motivating others to act. And this is really kind of a focus on, consensus, right? Leadership through consensus, which looks a little different than maybe just leadership in general, right? And so it is, about bringing people together to do things. Udall scholars also identify problems or needs that they can see, right, and propose solutions, right? So again, this is about action, right? A leadership based on action. You might not be surprised that taking initiative, right, and creating opportunities is another important factor. Again, right, because these are leaders who do things, who see problems and tackle them, right? And of course, the committee is also looking to see whether or not you're going to have significant impact in your career field. Again, leading by doing, right? And I've got a note here for you guys. Leadership is not simply a title, right? You don't necessarily have to be the president of your organization to show leadership. You don't have to have necessarily a long resume of secretary, president, right? They are interested in action, right, in what you do as well. So that's leadership. Public service, right? Oh, did you have a question, Jen?
I was going to ask about what her example was that she used in her application.
Well, I did use student government for leadership, working as environmental science, not environmental science, secretary of environmental studies, not environmental studies. But yeah, I know that a lot of people have used like a wide variety of anything.
So public service, right, is that next point that I outlined for you. And so, public service in this case can be either paid or volunteer, right? It doesn't necessarily have to only be volunteer work. And that work it can look a little different, right, than you might think, right? Obviously working for the government at any sort of level, whether that's law enforcement or military service, elected office, right, park service, things like that. Government work, right, is one way you can find, or you can show your public service, right? Working towards education, right, is also falls under that umbrella of public service. Preservation or restoration of natural and cultural resources, right? So you guys are starting to see it's kind of a broadly understood idea of public service. Healthcare services, right, fall under that as well. And of course, volunteering, right? Even though it doesn't necessarily have to be volunteer work, that is an important factor too. And if you're unsure about, your experiences and if they count for public service, we can help you figure that out in terms of that. And then finally, right, your commitment to the environment, or of course, to Native American issues as well. One of the ways that you can demonstrate this, right, is to really think of how you led these positive solutions to environmental problems. Again, right, think about that idea of leadership, connecting, right, with your commitment, how you've sort of seen these problems and how you tackled them, right. Again, this idea of consensus is really important for the Udall scholarship, right? So crossing the aisle is sort of connected into that, right? So how have you maybe approached topics, not just from one side, right? But bringing people together for consensus. And again, you want to think about how you've demonstrated another set of 3 words, right? Civility, integrity, and consensus. And it's in their little motto. We've got a little PS there, right? So again, like these terms, thinking about how you can apply these to work you've done, I think will be really helpful as you put your materials together. And our committee and of course us here at National Fellowships can help you fit those experiences into the application and sort of think about the ways in which you've demonstrated, right, integrity, civility, consensus. But again, that kind of gives you an idea of the character, right, of the scholarship and the application, and how you'll want to start to think about your experiences and sort of put them together there. So we'll move on now to the application components, and I will certainly invite Dr. Hogue and Emma to talk a little bit about this too, and then so I'll make my way through, but feel free to interrupt me as we go through, right? As you might expect, your application will have biographical information. You'll need to submit your transcripts, right? You'll need 3 letters of recommendation. And then we move into the sort of essay portion, right? And so there's a research experience essay where you talk about, your research experiences. The same goes for your leadership experience essay, right? Again, you're going to talk about how you've demonstrated leadership, right? The things you've done. Your commitment to the environment essay, right, is an important part of that, right? Or if you're doing the Native American track, that's where you'll talk about that. And then the public service essay, again, where you discuss your public service experiences. And these are all fairly short. I've actually got my application in front of me. And we're looking at, 1,500 characters, 2,400 characters, 1,000 characters, right? So not terribly long ones. You'll also have the additional information essay, right, where you can just address things that aren't otherwise sort of brought up in your application or don't fit, right? And then finally, the Udall essay, right, where in 800 words or less, you discuss a significant speech, legislative act, book, or public policy statement by Congressman Morris K. Udall or Secretary of the Interior Stuart L. Udall, who the scholarship is named after, right? And its impact on your field of study, your interests, and your career goals. So this is sort of the big research portion. And if you guys would like to say anything about any of these pieces, I'll get out of the way for that.
For me, it was really helpful just to start as early as possible. And even if you don't think that you have necessarily I haven't done very formal research, or I haven't done something like that, you can, as long as you can explain your why it was meaningful and how it can fit into it and what you learned from it, that's really great and important. And I think that just write a draft and then you can completely scrap it, but it's really helpful. And then when you go back and write it a second time, don't even look at it. And when you reread it, you'll automatically keep the good parts and get rid of the bad parts just by rewriting it. So it's super, super helpful. But letters of rec are for me always the most stressful, because I'm well, I know I can get my essay done, but asking people for letters of rec is kind of scary. But as you guys know, I had to ask for 8 letters of rec this year. So kind of a pro at it now, not really, but just get those done as fast as possible, because you don't want to be me and stressing about that, because that's out of your control. And teachers love to write letters of rec. They're always I find it helpful if you ask them to give you advice, and then be upfront that you want a letter of rec too. But it's really helpful if you have a conversation about what your goals are, and teachers are really great about giving you recommendations. And then since that, and then my teachers will email me and be you should join this listserv and things like that. So that they give good tips and stuff, especially if they know what you're interested in. So it's really useful.
So I'll follow up with only one thing first, is start early. I mean, really start early. It might seem that, what, I'm going to get this done because I know what I'm going to do, but then you start writing and you realize you don't know what you want to do. And letters of recommendation, right? We do love giving students letters of recommendation, and it's a good idea to tell your instructor, whoever asking for it, what you're writing for, okay? And then they might come back to say, can I have your resume? Can you give me a personal statement that I can use? And what that helps is it makes you start tailoring things towards what you want to see in your letter of recommendation. And that helps you with the essays you have to write, because you start thinking in that direction. I'd also suggest that you think of reading diverse portfolio of Udall. So don't just pick the most popular ones, because people tend to write about the most popular ones most of the time. When I go through the essays, they're quoting from the same places. So try to read a diverse set of it, not because you don't want to pick the most popular one, but because you might find what it is that really interests you. What is that Udall part that makes you unique? Remember that we're going to get all these essays that we're going to be reading from different people, right? You want to grab person's that. It's like going to the bookstore and you're flipping the pages and you read the last part and you're trying to decide which book you're going to buy, right? So when you're writing any of these essays, you have that 1,500 characters. Yes, it's not much, but the first sentence is going to be enough for me to know whether I want to continue reading this, whether I'm reading it because it's my job to read it or because I want to read it. There's a difference, right? I am going to read it, but I'd rather enjoy reading it, and you know that as well. So if at the very beginning it's very hard to write it, so for example, research experience, and you might sit down there and go, my interest is in this, but I did research in this. Well, it's not what you just did research on. Reflect on what you learned from your research. And simplest one is, when you try to plot something in Excel, you might say that I just want to use MATLAB, so why does it matter that I did something in Excel? Sorry, I'm in engineering, that's all I consider. But it's not that you're using MATLAB or Excel, two different softwares. It's the thought process of what you are looking at, the data when you're plotting it. You have to think of what it looks like. You have to think about what it is you're looking for. So it's not how you're generating your final result, it's the thought process into how you're going to do that result. And that's what needs to show up, and that's what your research is taught you. Okay? So if you've nothing else, to sit down there and write maybe 3 words. This is what my research taught me. Write 3 words today, write 3 words tomorrow, write 3 words next day. By the end of 7 days, you'll have what? Enough words, I guess, to at least form a paragraph. And then you'll be able to start from there. And like she said, when you write it again, scrap it. And you can do that through all of those, each of those experiences. Leadership experience, I've seen many of you try to write down that I led this group, or I was the president of this group. Sure, it sounds nice to see you're the president of this group, but don't fall into the trap of saying that you have to be the president of the group. And many times, president doesn't work. I mean, look around us. So you don't have to be the president to be the person to have initiated it, to have done it. Okay, so you don't have to be that person with the badge. You can be the person who came up with the idea, who got people together, and then maybe that other person simply had the resources to become the president. That does not mean your leadership skill failed in it. So please reflect on what you did and try to come at it from different angles. You know what I mean? So don't just get focused on, oh, I don't have that title, for example. Title is great, but it's really not going to be enough at the end of the day, because you're not going to, a person who has done it, thought about it, worked for it, is going to come through in the essay, as opposed to a person who was just there with the title or role. It just comes through when you write it out. The passion is missing. And it comes down when you write. So think about those words. And I use the word passion because this whole Udall, it's about passion. It's not only about your interests, it's not only about expertise, it's about your passion, about wanting to do something in this area. And if that doesn't show up, it doesn't matter how well your experience is. Sure, you might get through, but at a certain point, it's going to stop. So your passion has to go through. Think about that. What do you want to do? And write down those random words. It really helps me. So at the end of the day, I do look back and say, what was I thinking?
Yes, and that does, I feel like I should give one caveat, because I did say, oh, it's only 1,100 character or whatever. Often, I think, and maybe you were kind of leading us towards this, Dr. Hope, that, when you have less space to write, that can be much harder, right? Because you only have that kind of space. So again, starting early, don't give yourself simply the, oh, it's so short, I can do it, tomorrow. It's kind of the opposite, right? The less space you have, the more you might want to think of it. At least that's in my experience. So I just wanted to caveat that too. So these are the application components. But what does the process look like here? Well, we've got a slide about that with all sorts of dates for you. And so, the steps to nomination begin with the preliminary application. And the preliminary application is live right now. In our follow-up email after this workshop, we'll send you guys a link to that as well so that you have it available. You can also access that by using our intent to apply form, which is on our website. And I can share that with you guys here a little bit at the end. But that first step really is to complete your preliminary application, and that's due on the 1st of November. So the preliminary application, that also is going to function as your ticket to get to the next step in the process, which is the Udall writing workshop with our fantastic campus librarian, Valerie Lookingbill. That's going to be on the 5th of November, right? So if you turn in your preliminary application on the 1st, you'll have access to come to that writing workshop. That's going to be on the 5th, like I said, from 12 to 2 in Russell House 305. And what Valerie is going to do is help us look at the Udall resources, essentially, to help give you guys, some skills and some tools to dig through and find those Udall pieces that maybe aren't the first ones that everybody else pulls up, right? So it's a really useful workshop. Last year was the first year that we did it, and it was really successful. So, come and use these resources, right? We want to use the campus resources that we have available to us. Then after that point, right, you've got a lot of time before the application for nomination comes up. That's going to be on January 18th, right? So in the meantime, we really want to encourage you guys to, one, explore the resources available on Blackboard. We'll make sure to add you all to the Blackboard group that we've got, the organization, and specifically the Udall group, where we've got hints and tips, right? So I gave you guys just a taste of that with the hints and tips handout that I gave you today, as well as our campus overview, right? But there's a whole bunch more stuff available to you on Blackboard. In fact, I have my little packet here, so it's quite a bit, right? There's a bunch of stuff for you. So that's one resource. And in particular, we've got previous winning applications, right, on Blackboard for you guys to take a look at. So those are always a great resource that we point students to, and we have more, in fact, upstairs in our resource room. So if you flip through and you find, I'd like to see a few more, I'd like to see something, that's maybe more in my field, right? We've probably got an application for you upstairs. So please do take a look at that stuff. I will caution you guys, write a draft first before you look at other people's essays. Let your stuff come through first, and then look at what other people have done so that you can tinker. But it's always sort of better to start with your own experiences and your own sort of approach, because as Dr. Hoke said, right, they're interested in your passion, right, in your what you bring to the Udall scholarship, right. Also, in that period, right, we want you guys to come meet with us so that we can help you polish those essays, right, decide which experiences, right, are the best to use, and really kind of help you guys put your applications together. Don't forget to send those drafts a couple of days in advance. I think we asked for 3 business days. But we're happy to help you. I'm of course happy to help, but anyone in our office, right, can help you. We're all cross trained to talk about the different competitions. So obviously then on January 18th, you'll submit your application for nomination. It's at noon, due at noon. And then after that, we'll have interviews with the Udall committee, right? So that will be the week of January 24th. And we can nominate 4 nominees in both categories, right? So the environment and the Native American categories, right? And since we've got a total of 4 students here in the room with us, your chances are pretty good, right? Don't phone it in, but
No guarantees.
no guarantees, right? But we can kind of see the pool in front of us, right? So that's a quick rundown of the process. And I'll let our guests, if they want to toss anything in about that, you know, if you want to share from your experience in the past.
They offer really great advice on drafts. It's super helpful, all applications, and especially because they know what the foundation is, foundation is actually looking for. Because you might just be answering the question, but not know you want to show like consensus and stuff like that kind of stuff. And so it's helpful to have those reminders and that advice. So definitely utilize that resource.
I mean, it's good for us to see you guys as well after we have the package, so we kind of know what. And what I've seen interestingly when doing this interview experiences I have is that many times what you write and what you say don't match. So that's very interesting because I think that's what you're trying to convey in your writing, but as you write it, you kind of miss that. So in some ways, that's our job, is to kind of see if we can get more in-depth information from your writing and from your talking, and then maybe hopefully guide you into revealing yourself more in paper, right? So that's basically our job at that point, to see whether we can look at your writing, look at you, talk to you, and see if there are missing pieces, and also, I guess, to make a complete story. I know there are different components, but at the end of the day, it's all the branches of the same tree. So you're kind of trying to make this tree of yourself. So if they all connect together beautifully and seamlessly, that's an easy story to understand. But then we are the one who's reading the whole thing. You guys have you write it in individual times and pieces, and then you copy paste into the same application. But then when we are reading it, it seems obvious that, okay, so maybe if we divert this into this, or talk about it this way, it gets more interesting or gets more explicit. And sometimes you guys don't even talk about letter of recommendation. Maybe someone who mentioned something, and then we come back and say, hold on a second, it's not there in the essay. So that helps as well. So, yeah. So try to get the letter of recommendations as well with the original package. That's something that ends up getting missed because it helps us to see the big picture.
And as you guys can see, right, not only are we sort of as National Fellowships here to help you and support you, right, the committee is too, right? And that's, there is a lot of time here to be had, right? And they are here to help you. They're not just here to sort of say yes or no, right? So, it's worth thinking about it like that.
I mean, and no doesn't mean that we're saying that it's bad. We're just saying that you're probably better submitting it next year. Because you're going to be competing against another bunch of people who are nominating. You don't want to write something that's on the ongoing. Okay, you need some more experience in there. So take it as a positive feedback. Come back, and even for other applications, right? You can use that feedback for other scholarship applications, not only.
Awesome. So the last slide I've got for you is some more committee stuff, right? And I got sort of a couple of questions that we can talk through a little bit. And Emma, of course, you're welcome to chime in as well. So some of the common questions we get, right, are what is the committee looking for in nominees? And I know we've talked a little bit about that. If you guys want to say any more about that too, we can hit it right now.
I wish I could say that there is a checklist that we go through. We don't have a checklist. Each year, the applications that come in, they fall in their own categories. And we kind of at that point, since you, for example, have 6 or 7 nominees that year, you're trying to select 4 out of that 7 nominees that have come in. So you're comparing those 7 nominees, basically, and trying to see which one has the best chance. So it's not a matter of one being worse than the other. It's a matter of which one is the better fit to the Udall. And that's usually what is standing out. We look at the different fields that you're coming from, engineering or sciences, but that does not really, it's not as if, oh, there's only one engineering and 2 sciences, so we're going to choose one science and one engineering. That does not fit into it at all. It's all a matter of really which application seems the most ready to go ahead, because remember, you still have some time to prepare afterwards. So if your application, sometimes even if you're a good fit, your application may not be prepared to the point that we know you cannot get it to the submission point. So even though your passion and all of that is existing, all of that is great, But if you don't have the time to prepare and submit a complete whole package, it may not work out. So one thing we also look for in the nominees would be that, okay, is he or she going to be able to take the advice, put that incorporated and submit it? If that person, however good he or she may be, if that person cannot do that, then we usually recommend for next year because you can't prepare it. So it's a good idea to prepare as complete a package as possible so that you can go ahead and revise it. So that's one point.
Anything to add, Emma?
Yeah, I would just suggest, I think it is helpful to remember that people don't know you. So when you're doing these applications, like sometimes you forget like the most basic things about yourself that you should probably say. And so like the committee, like they'll ask you those questions and you'll be like, oh, wow, I should put this in. So it'll be helpful, but just remember that like they're completely outsiders looking in. So just don't think that like the little things aren't important because they definitely are.
So, you know, another common question, right, is how the committee evaluates applicants and sort of what the sort of points for evaluation are. And I know we've kind of hit on that too. Is there anything else you want to add maybe to that?
No, not really. Like I said, there is no checkbox.
I
I wish there were, it would make things easier for us, but there really is.
For Udall itself, there's like a check box, so right? So that's helpful for you guys to look at, because I think you get like an extra point if you show consensus building and things like that.
And I think we've got on our Blackboard page as well, right? One of the things we've got is a document called How Readers Read, What Works and What Doesn't, right? To help guide you guys in terms of evaluation, right? To make sure you're hitting the things that they're looking for, right? It literally says on here, readers look for, right? Which is really helpful. So again, another plug for our Blackboard page, right? And then finally, things that help applicants stand out, are there any things that might be worth?
I'd say someone who has taken the time to actually read through and submit something without errors. That's a must. Please, when you write your essays, there's enough spell check, Grammarly, enough things to make sure you don't make those errors, because that just makes it look less professional and you don't want to come across as that. So make sure your characters, your paragraph style, your fonts, things that someone will see at the very first glance, even before they read it, right? So make sure those are professional, and that for sure. One other thing that applicant stands out is when I read the Udall essay at the end. That really hits me usually, is how well that applicant has actually researched through Udall and have tried to look at it for his or her own work that they want to do, how it connects through it and how they work through that part of it. So at least for me, and this is different depending on who is the committee member. So it's kind of different on that one, but for me at least, the Udall essay is something that I do think, I like that a lot. I mean, I like that is in terms of, yes, he or she has spent some time to read about it, understand Udall, and is trying to reflect what they want to do through that. It's a good thing. I also like to see the leadership essay, some things, not like I mentioned before, things that they have done to kind of, not because they were trying to be a person, but just getting community together to do something. I think I read someone, I forget whose it was, I'm very bad at remembering that. About getting high school girls together to do something when she saw something when she was at school and decided that they needed to get together to do that action. And she did it. It wasn't a huge thing, but the fact that she thought about it at high school to think about doing it and writing it up, that's leadership. That's something nice to see. Because thought about doing that. The other thing is mention any of your extracurricular activities that you do and you like to do, right? Let that come out in your other essay, things that you want to share about others. Like she mentioned, we don't know you, we know you through the essay, and that goes for the people who are also evaluating. So that other part is really a place for you to tell them who you are, right? So it's not only leadership and research and Udall, you do have other components to your personality. So let that shine through as well. So those are the things I kind of look through, and when I see an applicant usually stands out from me is when I look at that other essay and I can distinguish and sort of figure out who that person is a little bit. That helps me.
And I just want to underscore that again, right? And I tell this to students all the time for just anything in terms of personal statements, right? Your reader only knows what you put on that page, right? They really only can see that, right? And it's easy to forget when we're writing, right? Because we know all these things. We have all these thoughts in our heads. We see how these things connect, right? But the more that you can show, right? The more you can put down on that page, right? That's all they're going to see. So if you forget, like Dr. Hook was saying, you know, sometimes we say things that we didn't write down, right? I talked to somebody today where I was like, we need to write this down, right? So keep that in mind because you have your space is at such a premium, right? In this application, you know, you want to make sure that you're getting, you know, everything you can, all the important pieces in, right? That demonstrate, you know, these different aspects. So since we've gotten kind of to the end of our written questions, I thought I'd open up the floor for you guys. What questions do you have for all of us? It's a small group, so it's great.
I guess, so like universities across the country nominate people and then there's a national pool.
Mhm.
Do you know like how many people usually get picked every year?
Not off the top of my head. Let's see. You guys wouldn't have
55 this year.
55 this year. There we go. Yes, and so like I said, right, we can nominate 4 from each category. With a 55 is what they did this past year. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea, right?
The one thing I will say, so I got honorable mention, which is obviously not winning, but what's really cool about Udall, when they say like the networking, they're not kidding. Because the only thing I got from it, other than being able to put on a resume, which is still like really great, is I'm on their listserv, which sounds annoying, but I literally get like 5 emails with like jobs. So that's like really incredible. And like there are some really cool jobs, and then there's some like really just fun, like smaller town ones, and then there are like big city ones. So it's literally anything you want. They're like throwing these really cool opportunities out at you. So like that's like pretty cool, and like but like Pauling's fellowship doesn't do that. Like so it's like really unique and cool. And then my other advice is going to be just write down like the main things that you would want somebody to know about you for the fellowship. Like just write those down, and then from there think about how you could put those in your essays. Because like when I'll do my essays, sometimes you'll start and you'll be like, okay, what research did I do? Whatever did I do? But then you're not telling like the things you like are most proud of, sort of. And like obviously you need to fit them into the categories, but it's good to like make sure that you're not like completely missing something that's like really important about you.
And that can be difficult, trying to write 5 words which describes yourself very nicely and proudly. I would have a tough time to write down that this is what I'm great at, and it's difficult to write it. So this would be a good time to hit people that are nice friends and say, hey, say something nice about me. And see if that will help you. But yes, that can be difficult. So it's good. So if there's one advice I have for all of you, start early. That's the best I can do. Please start early. Not like this class project you guys submit, don't start it.
But I think too, that's why it's also helpful to be in conversation with people, whether it be national fellowship coordinators or people on the committee, to just have that space to kind of talk about what matters to you and why. And as you were talking about that tree building, that can be helpful to verbalize out loud, to kind of think about how do all of these pieces fit together.
Excellent. Other questions, other things we can help you with?
I want to flag one of the resources on the Blackboard page because we had a former Udall scholar from USC actually worked for Udall for several years and now she's moved on to other positions. But one of the things that she created as a resource while she was there was a document called 20 Days to a Udall Draft or Udall Application.
I like
And
that.
she breaks it down day by day and it's like 30 to 60 minutes every day, like just do this brainstorm, just do this brainstorm. And a lot of it is like, write this down, don't edit, like just dump it. And so we have that on Blackboard for you as something. So especially as you're sort of starting to get started, thinking about those pieces, don't ignore that. You don't have to follow exactly, but I do think it's really useful to read through because it breaks it down in a way that makes it feel possible and not just staring at a full application thinking, how do I answer any of this? So that's one of my favorite. I want to adapt it for like every competition, but we have it for Udall, so let's make sure you.
Other questions, thoughts, concerns, fears, hopes, dreams?
How important is this is, most environmental applicants have a 3.7 or above. How important is that GPA? Like, not really a requirement, but is that a pretty important thing amongst the application compared to everything else?
I'll toss that to our committee chair. GPAs.
It only comes in a factor if there are two candidates with the same GPA.
Okay.
Other than that, and even then, it has to be exactly the same. I can't really compare two essays, but you do compare them, right? If I'm comparing two applicants and everything else, everyone has scored the same and every single component. And now I have to choose between the two students. Everything is the same, then maybe I'll look at the GPA. But that's impossible to happen, right? There's no way that I can give an essay 4 out of 4 and everything else will be 4 out of 4 for the same two people at the same time. So GPA matters, I'm not saying it does not matter, but it's not the sole source of decision making.
Any other questions? Any other thoughts? All right, well, we'll end a little early today. I want to thank you guys so much for coming. I look forward to working with all of you over the next few months to put together your Udall applications, and it's going to be great. So thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it. This nice small group, so I will remember all of you. I know most of you already anyway, so.
Remember all of you, that could also be a thread.
Right. Well, I won't hold you any longer. You're free to go. We'll be here if you have questions. Thanks again. And Harrison, I want you to swipe in. That's all I need you to do.
Handouts.
Oh, yeah, I got handouts.
Thank you, sorry for.
Oh, no worries.
You're over here.
We're counting it against you.
That's what we're gonna remember about you.